Thank you very much, Sahar, and all the panelists. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this very important webinar. I also want to thank the Southern Methodist University Human Rights Program for co-sponsoring this webinar, and also Mr. Sayyid Hadi Jawad and other leaders of the American Muslim community in Dallas, North Texas, who reached out to me almost 2 months ago after the terrible attack on Salman Rushdie in New York, and suggested the idea of co-organizing this webinar. And of course, I immediately welcome the idea and support the idea. So I'm happy that it's finally taking place. I always believed that if we want Islamophobia, the fear of Islam in the West, to subside or to end, we need to speak up about our faith. We need to speak up about what Islam truly stands for. And also we need to change the reality on the ground in the Muslim majority countries. It's not enough to say, in theory, Islam supports all these rights, because most people in the world don't care about the theory. They care about the practice. What's going on in the Muslim countries, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, that's how people in the United States or all over the world will judge Islam and Muslims. So we need to address both the theory and the practice of what Islam truly is and what it stands for, not only the theory. So one of the biggest misunderstandings today about Islam is that it does not stand for freedom of religion, or it does not stand for and respect freedom of conscience, or that it punishes those who criticize it, or that it imposes itself on believers and non-believers alike in the Muslim countries. So to me personally, the biggest proof that this is not true is the fact that Islam has coexisted peacefully and in harmony with other religions and religious minorities, and sometimes even majorities, for the past 14 centuries, all over the globe, from Nigeria to Spain, Andalusia, from Iraq and Iran and Egypt and Palestine, where you still have very significant and large Christian and Jewish minorities, to India, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, many other countries where Islam and Muslims coexisted and lived together in peace for centuries. If Islam did not tolerate and allow these religious minorities to exist, and by the way, religious minorities include other minorities within Islam itself. There are different schools of thought within Islam itself. If Islam did not allow these minorities to exist or to practice their religion freely and to live in peace and harmony, these religious minorities, hundreds of millions of people all over the globe, would not exist today after so many centuries, almost 14 centuries. But today, I want to focus on one specific example in the few minutes that I have. The question of freedom of religion and freedom of conscience in the new Tunisian constitution of 2014. As you know, this was the first and only democratically written, drafted, and approved constitution in the entire Arab world. In 2011, we had a popular uprising demanding freedom, dignity, and democracy. And so at the end of 2011, the Tunisian people elected a national constituent assembly to draft and approve a new constitution. 217 people, roughly a third of them were women, were elected to write a new constitution for the new democracy. 2 years, it took 2 years of discussions, of very intense discussions all over the country, in every village, in every city, very intense discussions about all the clauses in this constitution for 2 years, for 2 full years, took place across the country in order to build a consensus because we wanted a constitution for all Tunisians, not for the majority of Tunisians, and allow 30% or 40% of Tunisians to not approve the constitution. That would be terrible for the new democracy. So that's why it took too long. It took 2 full years. But one of the biggest and thorniest questions in the new constitution, and believe me, there were several thorny questions, but one of the biggest and most difficult ones was the question of freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. Basically, should we allow citizens to choose their own religion? Remember, 98% of Tunisians are Sunni Arab Muslim, but the question was asked and should be asked is, are people in the new democracy, should people be allowed to choose their own religion or to change their religion or to have no religion at all? So there was very intense discussions on this topic. CSID, my own organization, we were in Tunis at the time, organized literally hundreds of meetings and conferences and seminars. Some of them, very similar to this discussion that we are having today. Some of them were open to the public, others were closed only for the politicians or the religious scholars to discuss these topics. The debates were often very heated and intense for 2 years, 24 months. And we had activities and discussions on a daily and weekly basis. So some conservative elements, whether politicians or religious leaders and scholars, said they wanted to protect the religion of Islam and the homogeneity of the society. Again, 98% of Tunisians are Sunni Arab Muslims. So they were afraid that if we allow freedom of religion or anybody to change his religion, it's going to become chaotic. It's going to become, we're going to lose this homogeneity of the society. And they did not want to encourage people or allow people to leave Islam. But again, there was these intense discussions, and some of them we have videos on, and they are posted on our website. The question was, what is really the best way to protect Islam? We all agree as Muslims, we want to protect Islam. We believe in the religion of Islam. But do we protect Islam by imposing it on people? Is that the best way to protect Islam? And forcing people to believe in it, even if they don't really believe in it? Whether they like it or not, we force people to believe in one religion. Can you really force people to believe in something if they don't really believe in it? Or is it by engaging people, especially the younger generation and the younger people, but anybody who has questions about religions, about faith, about God, engage in a free debate and discussion about Islam itself, about the true meanings and the values of Islam, of the religion. Do we want true believers in Islam or in any religion who truly believe in God and believe in the values and tenets of the religion? Or do you want hypocrites who claim to believe in the religion because they are forced to, by law or by the state, but in reality they do not? And they are saying that only because they're afraid or they are scared. And so, we had a lot of discussions about this. The question became, what does Islam, first of all, say about this, about freedom of religion and freedom of conscience? As was mentioned today by several of the speakers and the scholars, and they don't have time here to enumerate all the arguments or all the verses, but a very famous ayah is La ikraha fi din. Let there be no compulsion in religion. I mean, it's very clear, very specific. And then the same ayah continues, truth stands out clearly from error. Whoever rejects evil and believes in God has grasped the most trustworthy hand, and that never breaks. And Allah heareth and knoweth all things. So here, this verse makes it very clear that people should be allowed to choose their religion, to believe or not to believe. Another verse, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. another very clear verse in the Quran, speaking to the Prophet, say, this is the truth from your Lord. Al-haqqu min rabbikum, the Quran and what I'm telling you is the truth. Then whosoever wants to believe, let him believe. And whosoever wants to disbelieve, let him disbelieve. Again, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. Let whoever wants to believe out of choice, not out of compulsion. Another and final verse here that I want to mention. قد جاءكم بصائر من ربكم فمن أبصر فلنفسه ومن عمي فعليها وما أنا عليكم بحفيظ. Another verse in the Quran, there has come to you enlightenment from your Lord. So whoever will see it does so for the benefit of his soul. And whoever is blind and does not see it does harm against it. And say, I'm not a guardian over you. To the Prophet, I'm not a guardian. I'm not going to guard you or force you. It's your choice. So the main argument in Tunisia in 2012, 2013 became really this question of freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. The fact that you cannot force people to believe in something. Either he believes or he does not. And God has given us this freedom to choose, because it's inherent in the creation, inherent in the fact that we are ultimately accountable to God in the day of judgment, that we have to be free to choose. How can God, Almighty God, hold us accountable if we don't have the freedom to choose, if we are forced to believe or not to believe? So again, I don't want to take too much time, but after 2 intense years of discussions between religious leaders, scholars, the politicians from the various political parties, and the citizens who also participated in the discussion, we finally agreed that freedom of religion must be protected. Freedom of conscience must be in the Constitution as a protected right, and that people have the right to choose their religion. Article 6 of the 2014 Constitution says the state is the guardian of religion in general, not just the religion. It guarantees freedom of conscience and belief, and the free exercise of religious practices, and the neutrality of mosques and places of worship from all parties and politics. So this is a very strong statement that the state guarantees freedom of conscience and freedom of belief. Unfortunately, as you all know, Tunisia had a coup against democracy last year, July 25, 2021. And since that coup, Qais Said, the coup leader, has imposed a new constitution, which was imposed in a fake referendum, rigged referendum this past July 2022. And this article was removed from the constitution.
Okay.
So in the new constitution, in the new dictatorship, in the new coup against democracy, this article that protects freedom of religion and freedom of conscience is no longer in the constitution that was imposed by Qais Said. So I will end here and look forward to our your questions and our discussions.